Hey there, it's Erin from the Impatient Gardener, and today I thought we would do a container tour. Now, I have planted up some of these containers in previous videos, so I'm going to update you on what those look like now, but there are also containers that I plant without making a video of them because, you know, how many of those can you see? And sometimes it's better to see them when they're a little bit grown in so you can get a better feel for what they are. So we're going to start with this big container, which is at the front, right by our front door, and our front door has big steps going up to it. So this needs to be a weighty container with some height to it. And I know you're wondering, like, where's the height? So this is I think this container is like 32 inches or 34 inches by 34 inches. We built it, and I will put a link in the description to how we built it because I did write a blog post about it several years ago. So I wanted to start here though because I wanted to talk a little bit about inspiration. I don't know if I've ever had a truly original idea in the garden. I take huge inspiration from other gardeners, and that's why I'm so happy when other gardeners are willing to share their work and share their gardens, because that is where I draw everything. Now, I don't know that I've ever directly copied anything from another gardener. I always like to put my own spin on it. But I do like to point out that, you know, I'm not necessarily coming up with these ideas. Sometimes, you know how this goes, you see something and you get inspired by it and then you forget where that came from. And that's kind of what happened here. As you know, plants are hard to come by this year. And I think we were all sort of looking to perhaps save a little bit of money in our gardens this year. And so I thought, okay, what can I do that draws primarily on the plants that I grew from seed? And I will tell you, I'm planting a lot of those here. And one of the things I'm noticing about growing a lot of flowers from seed this year, one, I can tell you right now I should have fertilized a lot more than I did. I barely fertilized at all. To be honest with you, I planted too much and I got overwhelmed by taking care of everything. So my key that everything needed fertilizer is pretty much the second I put anything in the ground, it immediately like doubles in size in days. So clearly these things were just dying to get some more nutrition and more water and get into the ground. So what I've done here is this entire center is planted with Nicotiana. Several different kinds. I grew, I think, 4 different kinds of Nicotiana. So I know that I have in here, there's one called Bella, which is pinks. There's one called Antique Lime Perfume, which is a shorter chartreuse one with a little bit of purple on the back side of it. There's one called Starlight Dancer, which is sort of white shades with that chartreuse in it. And I might have a little bit of my favorite, a lot of lime green in here, I think. I can't remember, and of course they all look the same once you put them in a pot. So I tried to arrange them more or less by tallest in the center and shorter on the outside. But this is gonna get quite rangy and quite wild looking at some point because, as you know, Nicotiana, they get fairly tall and just sort of around. I'm going to keep it from flopping over the sides if need be, but this should get quite full. Now, this is a great example of something where I got some great inspiration on this. Deborah Silver has a fabulous design business in Detroit, and she is one of the designers of containers that I look to the most for inspiration. And interestingly enough, I actually used a photo of the inspiration for this container on my blog with Deborah's permission several years ago. And when I started thinking about what to do with this container, that picture came into mind, but I completely forgotten I had seen that picture. So then it all came back to me. So Deborah did exactly this, and I'll put that picture up on the screen of Deborah's container, where she planted a lot of Nicotiana in the middle, and then she planted the entire outside with, I think it looks like violas to me. And this is where I took my own tack on this. So I did buy all sort of purple and blue shades of flowers. I've got a petunia, which is, fortunately, I always keep my tags in the corners here. It's called Blue-rific, and it has this sort of white center. I also have Superbena Large Lilac. Now, all of the Superbenas in here have sort of bloomed themselves out, and now they've got all new buds on them, so they're all going to have another flush here. But there's sort of a lilac color one, and then I have Super Bean a dark blue, which is the quite purpley one on the back. And then in the front I also stuck in a little bit of the lemon licorice plant, just to help tie that in, because I've got those licorice plants all over the place this year, so the whole idea was to just tie that in. So, you know, one of the disadvantages of starting a lot of things from seed is that none of my plants look great from the get-go like an annual that you go to the store and buy. So there is more waiting involved in it, and that is the biggest trade-off for me. Certainly I saved a ton of money by growing so many of my own plants and flowers this year, but the huge trade-off is that I'm probably missing at least a month of color in my garden, and when you have a short garden season, that's a big deal. So maybe I could have, if I had a better growing setup and I was better about fertilizing plants and had more room and frankly more time to pay attention to those, I probably could have gotten these plants a little closer where they needed to be when I was potting them up, but I didn't. And honestly, I don't see that situation changing. You can only do what you can do. And so that's something I'm going to weigh next year when I'm deciding what to plant. But these Nicotiana have all grown a ton. A couple of them are putting up bloom stalks. They have big leaves on them, so it will be a great look soon, I think. I have been clustering a lot of smaller pots together these days. So up here by the big pot, I have a container of eucomis. These are all the eucomis that I repotted this year. They grew last year. They're looking absolutely great in that container. Little bit of mint because I have to have my mint and it must go in a pot. I did the same basket here that I did last year, and this is just ornamental oregano. I've got two different varieties in here. I've got Kent Beauty and then another one. This is the Kent Beauty right here, and this is the other one. And I can't tell a bit of difference between any of them, so I don't know. But I always like having this basket. It will fill in more. There's some great sprouts coming from the middle there. When it works, I'm happy to repeat it. So here's an update on the Pagoda Dogwood planters that we did in the driveway. Everything is going really well with these. They did have a little bit of sun scorch on them at first. They've gotten over that. Everything looks great. They did bloom. Not a ton, but it was, what did bloom was beautiful, and now they have a few berries on them, and all the plants at the bottom are just doing really well. So I'm really happy with this change. I didn't know how much I needed the height here until I did that. So turns out that that rose that died that I replaced was actually really a blessing in disguise. And I will show you where that rose is growing in a second, but let's just take a closer look at how these guys are growing and what I have planted around them. At the base of one of the driveway containers, I've got more eucomis growing. That's a different variety than is in the other pot. And then I also have a mangave, and mangaves are hybrids between agaves and manfredas, and I'm growing them for the first time, and I'm having kind of a fun time giving them a try. I will bring them in for the winter because they will not be hardy outside. And then growing at the base of this one, I've got more eucomis, another mangave, and then this sweet lavender. This is Spanish lavender. It's called Primavera. It's from Darwin Perennials. It is not perennial here. It's only hardy to zone 7, but it's stunning in this pot. In case you're wondering what happened to the rose that was in those pots, it's living quite happily over on the other side of the house, blooming away. Okay, so let's check in on the urn. Now, we plant up this urn. Now, let's talk about the thing that everybody wants to know about, the wobble. A lot of you were really concerned about the wobble while this was being planted. It is not the urn that's wobbling, it was the pedestal that was wobbling. The pedestal no longer wobbles. I mean, there's a little movement there because it's not set on concrete, it's just set on stones in there. It has all been adjusted, we're all good, nothing's gonna fall over. It has grown in really well, and I'm really happy with it. The cannas are really starting to go. This is the Tropicana canna, which Now that leaf isn't great, but if you look at some of these as they get a little bit more mature, they get these stripes on there. It's beautiful when the setting sun comes through here and backlights them. It's absolutely gorgeous. I will say the carex is getting a little washed out, and a couple of people did point out that, you know, carex is generally likes a little bit more shade, and that you can see that in here for sure. The Purple Heart is filling in well, and the Bidens is doing well. So I'm really happy with how this is going, but in particular, I'm thrilled with how these cannas are starting to come into their own. Okay, so Dorothy's joining me to talk to you about the containers on the deck. A lot of you guys have been asking about Dorothy. Dorothy's still around, she's doing great. It's just that Dorothy really loves being inside, especially in summer, so she's just not kicking around the yard with me like Odin tends to. Also, Odin's a little bit my shadow. Dorothy has an affinity for Mr. Much More Patient. So if he's somewhere else, she's usually hanging out with him, especially if it's inside. So we are here at the deck containers. I will tell you, I just planted these up. You know, these containers suffered a little bit from what's left over syndrome, but I'm not unhappy with what we have going on here. So you know that I love growing annual vines, and I will link to an article that I've done about some great annual vines. So I always like to try something new. They are so rewarding because you put a seed in a pot, and then by the end of summer, you've got this enormous thing that grows. They just grow by leaps and bounds. So the one that I'm trying this year is called Purple Bell Vine. I think it's a pretty aggressive grower. It actually is starting to get some little purple bell flowers on it. They are diminutive, I would say, and I thought the flowers were supposed to get bigger than this, so I don't know if they will or not. So we'll see what this looks like. I also have in here a Main Street, I will have to put it on the screen. I think this is Main Street Red Coleus, Lemon Coral Sedum. I'm gonna put all the real names on the screen for you because now I'm guessing. Maybe a Rose Vein, Wave Petunia, Lemon Licorice Vine, and then this is a double Super Bells that I just kind of sucked for because it was so pretty and I liked it. I am always hesitant to put Super Bells in mixed containers, in particular with vines. Vines are super thirsty. Super Bells like to dry out a little bit. It's probably not a great combination, but I just had to have it. It was so pretty. So this is repeated on the post behind me as well. This one gets more sun than the other one's pretty early in the morning right now, so that's why there's no sun on this right now. Although you wouldn't know it, but this is east facing. It's just that there's a really big tree in the way that blocks the sun. So this will get sun for at least half the day. I mean, I think it's still considered full sun. The other one is probably considered part sun. So I know this is a super weird shot because my head with this window walkway above me is not great framing, but I'm not going to pull the ladder out again. Window box is coming in really well. You might notice one change, which is in the center. So I had planted a Supertunia Morning Glory, I think it's called Vicinal. It used to be Morning Glory Charm. Because I couldn't find what I really wanted, which was Supertunia Mini Indigo. However, that Morning Glory was just too washed out, and there was a lack of balance in here. So I actually ordered, at great expense, a Supertunia Indigo Vista Mini, whatever they're called now. I will put the name on the screen. And it came and it was a disaster. So I had to get my money back for that. And then I did find at a local nursery, I did find a Supertunia Blue Skies, which is what I had in there last year, and a Supertunia Royal Velvet. Brought them both home, and rather than making a decision, I just stuck them both in there. So these are new as of just a few days ago, so they haven't really filled out, but it's better having some more color contrast there now, I think. You'll see that the Purple Hyacinth Bean is doing its thing. It's starting to bloom. I'm happy with how everything's going with this window box. So far, I'll be even happier once we get these dahlias to grow up underneath it and we've got all that color coming in from behind. So that brings us to our last container, which is the trough that is over by the garage. Now, this is a tricky one to plant because it's pretty much shade, although you get a big shot of west sun in the evening, and it becomes bright shade later in the day. So, you know, it's always a balancing act on this one. I have found that begonias work well here, And it's a good thing because I love begonias. So I have 3 begonias, 2 different varieties. I've got the Bossa Nova white begonia. The best thing about these begonias, these are sort of the type that hang down, this is Boliviensis, I believe, is that they have this salmon colored backside. So you get both the white and the salmon. And in the middle, you've got just a big hit of salmon. These are my colors, people. I love this. I have gone before kind of monochromatic with this container, and it does get a little dull over here, so I'm really happy to have brought some color in. I also have in here, what you see, the big leaf sticking up here is Plectranthus. This is longwood silver. It's very similar to silver shield. I don't really know what the difference is. The good news with this is that it is very easy to propagate, so you can actually just nip this off with a node and stick it in soil or water, and you'll get roots right away. So I've got 4 of those planted in there, and actually, or 3 of those? 4 of those planted in there, and 2 of those I just propagated. In the back I have, unfortunately they're getting buried a little bit, but I think they're going to get taller. I've got the new improved Beacon White Impatiens. Now, if you've grown Impatiens before, and I'm not talking New Guinea Impatiens, if you've grown Impatiens before, you might have stopped growing or had a hard time finding them in the stores, and that's because Impatiens were really affected by Impatiens downy mildew, which would wipe out your plants in like a day. So there are 2 new Impatiens on the market, and I think Beacon was the first one to come out that is resistant to downy mildew. So I'm trying out Impatiens for the first time in a long time, and I just have the white one in there. It's growing really well. It's beautiful. Now, the intention for this was to have this great vine called Cissus discolor growing up this trellis. By the way, I'll put a link to the story about this trellis in the description as well. This is part of the trellis that's in the circle garden. This is permanently mounted to the wall here. So the plan was to have Cissus discolor, some people call it Rex begonia vine, working its way up here. But it's a perennial. Although a non-hardy perennial here. So I got it. It was extremely small, and it's not growing very fast. So I have it in a pot, so it'll be easier for me to take out and bring inside over the year. And at some point it becomes kind of a beast, but it's far from a beast now. So just the other day, I had a spare purple bell vine, and I added in a spare purple bell vine. Just because I want to cover this up a little bit. I don't think that bell vine will bloom very well in this location because there's not enough sun for that. But at this point, I'm more interested in foliage, just something to cover this area a little bit and get going up this trellis, because it looks really silly to have a planter under a trellis with nothing on the trellis. So that's the first look at this year's containers. We'll of course follow these throughout the season. You know how they grow and they just get better and better. And I look forward to hearing what you guys think about it. You guys know that I love container gardening. I love putting combinations together, so it's always something new and different. So I hope you're having a good day in your garden, and stay tuned for updates on these.